Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today in the second week of COP, getting closer towards the end. But definitely the conversations that the Global Renewables have continued. We are so excited to have you all here for an event organized by one of our partners, the Global Alliance for Sustainable Energy. So as we all know, renewable energy is one of the key solutions to the climate crisis and to reducing emissions from the energy sector. However, challenges remain as we need to ensure that, for example, the supply chains of renewable energy sector are sustainable and respect human rights and rights of communities. And this is exactly what the Global Alliance for Sustainable Energy is doing. So today we'll have a conversation with a number of partners and stakeholders who have been playing an important role in shaping the work of the Alliance, and we'll be able to together reflect on the outcomes of its work. So I would like to invite our panelists for today. Sarah Bakali, representing the Global Alliance for Sustainable Energy. Gail Schuler, representing 3M. Mario Rivera, representing Politecnico Torino. Santosh Kumar Singh, representing Adani. Natalia, representing Youth Climate Leaders. And Anna Rosa, representing the Global Renewables Alliance. Okay, so thank you so much for being with us today. And to kick us off, I would like to invite Sarah to share her remarks on the role of the Alliance, because recently the Human Rights Working Group released a report with recommendations for the industry how to improve its practices. So Sarah, over to you to share the outcomes with us.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's a real pleasure to be joining this esteemed panel today. Before I go into the human rights position paper of the Alliance, I just wanted to make sure that I kind of set the context and set the scene as to why human rights and climate change are interlinked. I think in today's world, it's quite obvious that both need to be addressed. Seeing the several wars around us, ongoing genocide, and other horrific events erupting around us. So it is worth emphasizing that climate change, is a result of human behavior, of humans within human institutions, and not just an accident of nature, as sometimes represented. If we look at it, for example, historically, we see that colonial powers used to frame the environment as something separate from human life or separate from humans. To frame it and describe it as something that we need to control, something that we need to tame, and not so much something that's part of us as human beings. And it's really good to see here at COP as well that youth and other activists are pushing back against that and are saying there can't be any climate justice without human rights. I think for stakeholders and their international partners, it's therefore really important to, if they want to effectively address climate change, to consider the wider political, social, and economic context of a particular country, for example, but institutions have a role to play there as well. And on a practical level, research has shown that political will is very much informed by stability of a country, stability of a region, and political will to address things like adaptation, resilience are interlinked to how stable a country is. So even on a practical level, we need to consider human rights going forward. So to bring it back to kind of the question of the interconnectedness between sustainable energy and human rights, I can say that the connection is profound and still remains largely underexplored. Of course, we know that access to affordable energy, to clean energy, is a fundamental human rights in and of itself. But it's also a catalyst to realize other human rights. We also see that inadequate access to energy often disproportionately affects marginalized communities, So ensuring that they have access to it ensures their human rights as well. So just to sum up, I believe that embracing sustainable energy sources not only mitigates adverse climate impacts, but also enhances the human rights agenda that we're trying to push. Of course, it's not all possibilities and positive things that come out of the green transition. There are a few risks as well that we need to speak about. If we think, for example, of big green infrastructure projects, we see that there's no problem with those projects existing. Of course, they have to exist, but the problem is that they often replicate patterns from the past. So what we see is they focus a lot on large scale, very quickly, quick turnover, focus on making media headlines, and not so much on how to conduct in a holistic way, making sure that communities are engaged, making sure that human rights are respected, and so on. So, of course, sustainable energy, the green transition, that is the way to go. We cannot rely on fossil fuels any longer. We've also seen that fossil fuels has not secured human rights in a way that we would have wanted. And we see sustainable energy and the green transition as something that perhaps can shape a new world and break from the legacy of fossil fuel. So just as a brief background to that. Then in terms of the position paper of our working group at the Alliance, I first want to give a bit of a shout out to the chairs and co-chairs of the working group, Eduardo, Alina, and Pedro, who worked tirelessly to progress works on human rights within the Alliance, to come up with a position paper that outlines key commitments on human rights, and the unique feature of this initiative and of this working group is that it's an industry-led effort. So it's not something that's imposed from civil society or NGOs per se. Definitely built on human rights frameworks, of course. Something that these Alliance members have come together to progress. And I'm happy to discuss a little bit more later on, what these commitments look like, and what else you can expect. But I'll stop here and hand over to my colleagues.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah, for those opening remarks and giving us an overview of what the Alliance is working for and about the importance about interlinkage between sustainability of the supply chains, renewable energy, and human rights. So now, Gail, I would like to turn it over to you, because when we talk about renewables, we often talk about technology, and technology is something 3M is definitely associated with. And yet, you are part of this alliance, and you definitely value the role of technology for addressing social and climate issues. So, could you elaborate a little bit more about how that innovation plays into it?
Happy to, and this is the kind of thing I can go on for hours. Is that better? Yes. There we go. Okay, well, so innovation and applying innovation for sustainability is the kind of subject I could talk about for hours. And I guess in the course of this COP, I have, but I won't do that right now because there's a lot of great content that's going to come from others. I think that when we think about sustainability in general and specifically climate change, we need to lean in big ways. It's about that science and technology and innovation. It's about acting with urgency. It's about collaboration between people in different processes and really engaging with the broader community. So that's one of the things I like a lot about this panel. If we look at how far we've come in renewables, we've really come a long way. Now, I know that the data with the SDG global stock take and with the WRI reports, BCG, all of the reports coming out, says we're not there fast enough, and I know that we're not. But the data one of the pieces of data from a panel that Santosh and I were on earlier in the week that's really interesting is if you look at the linear model, we are there with things like personal vehicle electrification. And what that means is they're looking at that linear trajectory. What I think is really important when we think about technology and innovation is we need to look at the technology adoption S-curves. So you take like the percentage of adoption over time, and it starts with one. There was one railroad, there was one toilet, there was one phone, there was one renewable electricity piece. I don't know whether it's a solar farm or a wind farm or smaller pieces. You start with one and then you go into more. And you recognize what's key, and what I love about COP is that there's key technologies that need to break through at any given point in time. And so one of the things I think really exciting for renewables is just a few years ago, maybe as recently as last COP, we talked a lot about energy storage and how could you possibly, if the wind wasn't blowing and the sun wasn't shining, how could you possibly have renewable energy? Well, the fact is that there's a lot of solutions that we've already come up with where we're finding ways to go for very high percentages, and, up to and pushing 100% in certain times in certain geographies, because we're able to do that, multiple hours of storage. What we need to work on now is how we adapt to longer seasonal storage, and there's a number of different techniques that are being explored now with encouraging results. We need to come up that curve. I believe technology is the answer. It'll be interesting to see if others have different perspectives, but I believe that the science and technology are what we need to make it happen. And it's that collaboration from different perspectives that make it work. I can talk a lot more, but I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you so much, Gail. This was some great remarks, and I'm glad we're way past the time when there was only one toilet and one railroad. And now everyone has access to those goods. So, but let's continue with remarks from the private. I just clicked for something. Let's continue with the remarks from the private sector, and you mentioned, Gail, about the role of about technology for communities. So, Santosh, it would be great to hear your remarks on how Adani uses renewables to support the process of just transition and empowering communities.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The entire COP has been talking about the need the energy sector has to contribute for decarbonization and meeting the climate goals. Now it's one of the largest contributors, almost 40% of the total GHG emission comes from the energy sector. There is a huge potential of renewables coming into play, and Adani Green is a pure play renewable energy company. It is not only for decarbonization of the grid or the electricity sector, but what now we are looking at is the electrolyzers coming into play, the kind of scale of operation electrolyzers will have, and the green electrons driving those electrolyzers. Once you have green hydrogen, and then you can have a lot of derivatives. So this has the potential of changing the entire carbon cycle. These derivatives will contribute towards decarbonization of very hard to abate sector. You can have ethanol, you can have green power mobility, you can have green ammonia, you can have the entire fertilizer or agri system becoming decarbonized. So that's the way we are looking at it, and as of now we have almost 8.5 gigawatt of operational capacity. Another 12 gigawatt is under construction. So we are into pure play solar wind and solar wind hybrid. And we have plans to put up 45 gigawatt of operational capacity by 2030. So this will be grid connected. And as Gail was talking about the storage of the renewables, so we are working on it almost, but we are working on a different technology altogether. We are working on pump storage projects. Those are mini hydro projects where wherever you have surplus renewables, you can store them on an upper reservoir, and then whenever the demand is there, you can drive your reversible turbines. What we see is that we can have almost 80 to 85% of the energy back into the grid, and at a cost which is 3.5 cents per unit. So it is, with present level of technology, it's much more affordable than all other storage systems. But yeah, I agree that we have to look at seasonal storages as well. Because this doesn't give you a seasonal kind of storage. It's only 6 to 8 hours of meeting the peak demand whenever you have off solar system. So that's what we have been doing, and I believe the renewable energy sector has a huge leverage in decarbonization, not only of electricity and energy sector, but also different sectors also. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. So yeah, we slowly move from opportunities to challenges, and storage is definitely challenges for decarbonization. So Mario, I would like to bring you into the conversation to continue this thread. What challenges for decarbonization do you see? But also, if you could touch on what is the role of a university like yours in the Alliance, because I think the Alliance is a great example of multi-stakeholder collaboration that brings on board both private sector and academic institutions like yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, you touched the point. My point of view is the point of view of a university and the point of view of a public university. Let's say that we have developed the decarbonization plan for our university. And just to give you the example, we have a plan that is aiming to a net zero by 2040, but we won't be able right now with the current situation to get to that target. Because we don't have the levers all in our hands in order to get to that target. So the point is we need to involve the external stakeholders, the institutions, the electric companies, the people and the companies we rely on in order to buy electricity, to buy district heating and so on. We need them to go in our same direction. That means to decarbonize and to use renewable energies. And so the stimulus that our university can give is, let's say, taking on board the 40,000 students that we have and altogether pass messages in terms of volunteer of going in a certain direction. And this direction must be understood and must be followed also by local institutions, by private companies and so on. And in this, the university has a huge power of influencing a huge number of people, starting from the academic community itself, that is, as I said, the professors and students. We're talking in our case of 40,000 people approximately, to all the families and relatives and the community in which these 40,000 students live. And this is again a significant number of people that you can get, that you can influence, and you can get to the same point and the same conclusions. So, in my opinion, university has a huge role in going into the right direction, both for influencing the next generations and both, of course, for thanks to research, for driving some of the lines, some of the guidelines that can lead us to a net zero in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think there is no better person to continue speaking about the role of future generation than Natalie from the Youth Climate Leaders. So let's continue this thread. And Natalie, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think definitely scaling up renewables, phasing out fossil fuels are slogans that are very strongly adopted by the youth climate movement. But I think the idea of sustainable practices in renewable energy sector is still something that is not fully understood by many of the young people out there. So it'd be great to know how you engage with this topic.
Hello everyone. I'm really grateful for the opportunity gave me from Youth Climate Leaders, because I'm a fellow of the course, so it's really nice to be here. And just to build upon also and echoing the voice of the university, and I'm Natalia, I'm from the Amazon region in Brazil, and the Youth Climate Leaders actually was my first experience of capacity building for sustainable development, for climate, for the just transition. And it was the first time I got in touch with what could mean to have a green job or to participate in this implementation. Currently I'm working in Fundación Abina, and I'm working with capacity building initiatives, so I feel like I'm replying what I've learned so far. But I mean, the focus of youth climate movements are now really on the advocacy part, and we are trying to make our voices heard and everything. But it's a question that I have in my mind, and I feel like we've been sharing among ourselves that, okay, we are here, what we do, what can we do to participate fully in the implementation, in the future jobs, in the implementation of this climate transition, this green transition, or whatever you want to call it, and what whole role do we play in the climate justice, right? Because I grew up in the Amazon, so for me it was a little bit, okay, this is my home, but how do I play a part on what we've been doing? And I feel that capacity building initiatives, for example, can empower us to be at these tables, but also to create new opportunities to participate in this energy transition and this future jobs that we will need to have to amplify the renewable energy, but also still in the same pathway, working to the decarbonization of the world, right? So, and from a global south perspective, this is something pretty, pretty global north centered discussions, right? When you talk about energy, it's still a little bit not understood by some of us, because although I was talking with the University of United Nations University rector, and she was telling me that I don't like the term capacity building because we are not stupid, and it's true, we are not stupid, and we have a lot of capacities to build upon and to collaborate in this transition that's coming. But some things are still so far away in terms of technical expertise, and I just wanted to highlight and echo the voices of universities and of initiatives such as Youth Climate Leaders that give us the opportunity to get closer to a network that is really working on this just transition and in just this climate justice scenario that we are trying to build and trying to bring youth in the center of this future movement that we are trying to build, and also in the perspective of green jobs.
Thank you, Natalie. So I would love to actually follow up on what you just said, because the Alliance is bringing together many stakeholders, both private sectors, universities, it interfaces with governments, and you spoke about the role of enabling younger generations to be involved in the energy transition. So how do you potentially see your organization engaging with the Alliance as a whole, but also with the different segments of members, of partners that it works with?
I will let this one to Cassia, because I'm here as a fellow. I'm not working in Youth Climate Leaders, but it's still a case of a potential person that entered in the climate world through the Youth Climate Leaders.
Sorry, very quickly, I'm Cassia, founder of Youth Climate Leaders, just ran from another panel. I believe there's a huge opportunity to the organizations that are part of the Alliance. Let us know first, what skills do you need to be developed? What are the jobs coming from these transitions? Because I think it's a two-way road. We are going also to show what young people are looking for at the jobs, because they're worried about retention for sure, and young people have different goals for their professional and personal life than other generations had and will have. So it's interesting to see that. And one of the programs that we developed before, like a few years ago, was we called Capacita Clima. Is still on the planning stage, but the idea is to support the massive capacity building for the climate career. So, for example, we have the Green New Deals, we have now the Brazilian plan for ecological transition. Like, if you hope to have 100,000 people working as electricians for solar panels, can we capacitate them into a record level? Can we already do trainings that people will leave with jobs. I think this is something that YCL cannot do alone, any of our companies cannot do alone, or government. So we need an alliance that goes and help us to see what are the opportunities, to train people in time, because we don't have a lot of time. So count on us for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I hope, Sarah, you had a chance to take notes so you can incorporate it in the next iteration of the work plan. So to close the first round of questions, I will come to Anna, representing the Global Renewable Alliance. It's been exciting 1.5 weeks. I mean, we have over 120 countries signed up to the Global Renewables Pledge to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030 and double the rates of energy efficiency improvements. So we are hopefully about to usher in the new era of growth of the renewable energy sector, and as the entity that represents the private sector here, the GRA has played a pivotal role in this process. So, Anna, what trends do you see? And in the context of work of the Global Alliance for Sustainable Energy, how do you think they can stay on top of their game to make sure we keep this energy sector as sustainable as we can?
Thank you for the question. Indeed, building on this wonderful panel and building on your number, let's round it up. It's 130 now.
Okay.
So this number keeps changing all the time for the better, and I think that that's actually a really good sign. I don't need to tell you, Benji, we at the GRA have been pushing very hard for this tripling renewables by 2030 target. The fact that we are at 130 countries means that technically tomorrow we can go to these countries and say, here's your pledge, right? What are we going to do about this tomorrow? What comes after tomorrow, let's say after COP, because there's still a text negotiation underway, we should know more about that, every coming hour, is obviously a lot of work at hand. One, to keep pushing on this campaign, but another to start to implement this. What needs to happen in the next 7 years so that we actually get to that target? Many different working areas, but sustainability and youth and jobs are two very relevant ones to this panel. Maybe to explain here a little bit further, on the sustainability front, there is a lot that is obviously top of mind within the industry perspective. First, because there's a lot of lessons learned from the past decades of work, depending on which technology we're looking at. We regroup 6 of them: geothermal, solar, wind, hydropower, green hydrogen, and storage. So that brings together quite a bit of body of knowledge in terms of what has happened in the renewable sector and then the wider energy sector at large. So there's a lot of lessons learned there. Second is that there's a lot of work underway on what sustainability actually encompasses. This is not easy because this has to do with definitions, measurement, quantifying, qualifying what that means. Does it mean the same for each country? Does it mean the same for each company? How do we go about that? This is based for now on, for example, principles like SDGs, which I always find very encouraging, because what the SDGs have given us is a common language. COP28 is very much an exercise in that as well. Tripling would give us a common language. 1.5 gives us a common language. So it's really not to be underestimated what that gives us in terms of sitting around the table and then getting more importance, getting advancements in terms of sustainability discussion. So a lot is underway. Companies are working on this in terms of targets, in terms of frameworks. Much still needs to happen. Some frameworks help. Policy is absolutely vital. An example such as what came out about a year ago in Europe, the ESFF, so this framework for sustainability in finance, helps a lot to plug the gaps. This is very complex because companies have to then learn that new language and cascade that down to their projects, but it's being done, and at GRA we watch that very closely because we know that that's just going to be part of the future going forward. The second is jobs. The very fact that we're having this discussion, that we have a program on youth, that we have panels on youth, that we have a youth work stream, that we have ambassadors, that we really are reaching out, and it's not just us, this is not just to our credit, this is the most inclusive COP, if I've understood. It's the biggest COP, 100,000 delegates, and it's the most inclusive one. That goes to show 2 things. We're being more inclusive in the discussion, so we're far away from where we were at 10 years ago in terms of renewables, but we're also trying to prepare for what comes next. that jobs aspect. Now, when I started in renewables, I don't want to say no one was listening to me. I understand that they weren't, like this, we needed to build up credibility. But it's very different, I find, to start off in the renewable sector today than it was 10 years ago when we were still nascent. So this is a good sign. It's part of defining what's important. It's part of being in that room, setting that agenda, speaking that language as well, because companies, the ones that decide, they're from 1-2 constituencies, from 1-2 age groups, from one or another gender, etc., etc. We know this. So that's something that we're looking at tremendously as well, and we're very happy to work on that with GASE going forward. But I'll stop here for now.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. So let's just continue with you for one more question, and it'd be great to know how, in the context of different trends that you've identified, how can organizations and business collaborate more closely? Because GRA works very closely with the private sector, but we also know that there are other stakeholders like universities and other associations. So how can we do that to address some of those challenges in sustainability that you presented?
So I think what's important is to, as this is becoming mainstream now, the discussion with youth, the discussion on sustainability, or at least we're trying to make it more mainstream than it is currently. I think the next step that would be extremely important is to get to something, to a concrete agenda. I say this because, if we're talking about tripling renewables, we need to fill skills gaps, we need to create jobs, we need to be more inclusive, we need to create the future that's going to actually take this all forward. Private sector is going to organize for itself around this. It's going to see that growth, it sees it today, it's going to start preparing according to that. So it needs to start asking concrete questions on what is actually necessary. And that dialogue needs to now take place. So we're starting to have the major high-level talking points and dialogues, hearing each other, tour de tables where we know, okay, this is what youth thinks, this is what sustainability means to this or that stakeholder group. I think we now need to get even a little bit more operational. Concrete points, what exact skills, how do we factor that into curricula at higher education? How do we translate that into vocational training? How does a company that sees issues with, we need to have more solar PV installers, we're going to need to see more, installers of electric vehicle chargers, we have concrete STEM needs, for example, right? How do we be part of that? Can we create dialogue between private sector and academia? It's already being done in some of our industry associations, actually. But how do we take that further? And to let that actually become education of the future, always co-designed and co-created. So going from saying it's important to saying, okay, how are we going to do it now? That would be essential.
Thank you, Anna. And so now all of you shared with us some high-level challenges and opportunities, and now I would like to go to more specific cases. So Santosh, Gail, and Mario, I'll ask each of you to share with us examples of innovative solutions, programs, projects that your respective organizations are implementing to improve sustainability of the energy sector. In case of Santosh and Gail, this can be specifically operations of your companies. I'm sure there's lots to say. And Mario, feel free to also share with us something about the how you work with the companies or with the workforce on that. So Santosh has the microphone, so let's start with him.
Yeah, we strongly believe that renewable energy company in itself, just being into renewable may not be sustainable. For making the company and the business sustainable, you have to do a lot many things. What we work on towards sustainability, we have a lot of initiatives such as the entire company, Adani Green Energy Limited, as on today is water positive. You still need water for cleaning those panels. So first we started innovating with low water cooling, low water cleaning, and then robotic cleaning. In addition, what we have done is, like these are, typically these projects require very large tract of land, and that too mostly done in arid and semi-arid region. So while designing the project itself, we do a complete rainwater harvesting study kind of thing, or water basin kind of study. and then make sure that whatever rainwater we get, we recharge the community water infrastructure. So not only we reduce our water consumption, but also work with community in enhancing their water availability. Secondly, what we have done is we have made the entire company as single-use plastic free. And this we did 2 years before the actual legislation came into India, where we identified all the single-use plastic, the entire inventory of coming into the system. Then went about a very detailed study, what can be avoided, what can be replaced, what can be recycled or changed into something else. So it took almost 1.5 years to work with all our supply chain partners, and we are now a single-use plastic free company. We have also implemented a zero waste to landfill policy, and we already certified that we have diverted almost 99.6% waste away from the landfill. So certified as a zero waste to landfill. Now then, one more aspect that we are working on is biodiversity, because when you get large tract of land and then you have biodiversity issues. And what is also happening is all these projects are at geographic locations which are different from the earlier conventional energy companies. Earlier they used to be either pitted or load center near the habitation. But these are into arid and semi-arid region, and they need high voltage transmission system to bring to the load centers. So again you have those wildlife issues or many times forest issues. So we are working on it. We are working on no net loss to biodiversity. Wherever we have biodiversity hotspots or we identify it can have impact on biodiversity, we work on identifying them and then having a mitigation measure, and also restoring a lot of critical biodiversity habitats. So these are some of the initiatives that we have already implemented, and I believe we'll do more.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we're battling some noise from the outside. But yeah, thank you for sharing. I think this is such a good point, because often the conversation about making our energy sector more sustainable ends with, okay, let's just switch to renewables, but as you just outlined, there are all those aspects we have to think about, whether it's the disposable products in your supply chains, in your factories, all the way to how you use water in your operations. So thanks to you for doing this on behalf of the planet. Mario, over to you.
Okay, so you're asking for, let's say, practical cases of collaboration. And I think that our university, that is a technical university, has many examples we can share in this topic. So some years ago, something like almost 10 years ago, we set up, let's say, a new building, but this is not just a new building, it's called Energy Center. And it has to do with energy, it has to do with renewables, and it is a building dedicated to work together between professors and research and companies that have to do with the energy sector. So we have companies like Edison, like Eni, like Iron, is the municipality of Turin, and they stay in our building. They work together with our researchers in order to apply and to take home the experience coming from research. I think that this is a valid and proven and effective result of a vision that wants research to be integrated with the real life of the industry field. Moreover, again, some research groups, again from the Energy Center lab, because the Energy Center has many labs dedicated to this, are working now with the town of Torino, with the city of Torino, with the municipality, in order to gather all information about the emissions of the town, so CO2 emissions. We have, I think, the best databases on emissions, gathering all information from electricity, on district heating, commuting, transports and everything. And we can make simulations with the town in order to help them take the right decisions. And we also help them in a process that is called the Climate City Contract. The town, the city is signing contracts with big stakeholders in the territory, like universities, like public companies, like public mobility companies, like big industries. And each company, each stakeholder has to make a commitment in terms of reduction of emissions for the next years. And so they sign, with our help, these contracts. And then we have the possibility to monitor the progress and the results of this commitment 3 years. And this is something that will help us and will help our town, our city, to reach the goals of the set. So data are absolutely important and necessary in order to check whether we're going in the right direction. And this is one of the cases where the power of the dimension of town gets big benefits from the experience and the innovation coming from university and coming from research. So I think I gave you some examples. There are many others. Another one, for instance, is a lab that we have established and is very active, and it's dedicated to getting energy from the tides. It's unique in Italy, and it has received many acknowledgements and so on. It's again another case, another type of joint activities between our university and companies that work in our country and not only in our country.
Thank you for sharing those examples. Yeah, over to you.
Sure, and usually when I answer this, I talk about different products that we have. So whether it's films that help make the wind turbine blades last longer, or films that also help the either keep the solar panels clean so that they can collect efficiently, or so that they can manage the light efficiently. You know, all of those were things that we worked on with customers in collaboration, building off of 50 plus technology platforms. But I think the way this conversation is going, I'm going to use a bit of a different example, and it's kind of more of a business model example. When 3M first got into renewable energy and installing it at our facilities, that was the approach that we took, is that we would install it on our rooftops, say in Milan, or on a rooftop in Singapore, and we still do some of that. But one of the things we realized when we started to get to the larger spaces and wanted to make a bigger impact, we were a commitment to go to 100% renewable electricity. We've already passed our 50% mark. When we go to the bigger pieces, just putting them on the rooftops at our own facility, sometimes we can do it and it still doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's not big enough, but sometimes it still doesn't make sense because of the idea that if we were to pull the electricity off of the grid and take it into our own facilities for running a manufacturing site, so a large footprint for electricity, that would actually be disadvantageous to the local community, because the load in the community would be more volatile, the expense of bringing renewables in later would be more expensive, and it really wasn't the right thing for the community. So that was, I would say, something that we learned by working with local governments, working with community leaders, that there was actually a smarter way for us to go about installing renewable energy at our facilities, since we do have a significant footprint, particularly in manufacturing sites. So I think that's the innovation example that I would cite for this particular one. But if you want to talk about products, I assure you we can talk more later.
Thank you so much again. I'm sure there's so much to share knowing the wide scale of products that 3M offers. So we have just a few minutes left, and I would probably hand it over back to Sarah for some closing remarks. But before that, I don't know if there's any quick feedback from any of the panelists. Anyone would like to add anything? No? Okay, seeing none.
No, this was really interesting and reflects kind of the type of work that the Alliance does and the type of stakeholders the Alliance brings in as well. I mean, we've heard from youth leaders, we've heard from the Global Renewables Alliance, we've heard from companies and universities. And just to bring it back to my previous introduction on human rights and making sure that we always continue to break silos. You know, human rights was always quite state-centric, but nowadays we see private sector really taking a lead in, you know, looking at their own operations and saying, okay, how can we avoid, you know, damage? How can we avoid violations? And the position paper that will be published in 2024 also looks into that, and is actually a effort of Alliance members, 13 industrial members, who came together to set commitments for themselves, looking first at what type of adverse impacts do our operations, what are the risks of our operations, then how can we aim to solve those or prevent those. There's a focus on information sharing as well. All these companies have already some ESG commitments, but they have committed to expanding on those, have committed to publicly say these are the human rights commitments that we are planning to adhere to. This is the information that we're planning to share with the world, in the form of KPIs and so on. So it's just an initiative that really highlights how the role that private sector can also play in social responsibility across the value chain, and that's a big focus. So I would say watch this space. The report will come out in the new year, and it wouldn't have been possible without all the information and knowledge that this panel has brought us today. And I would like to thank everyone joining us as well, both here and those who will watch the recording later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to the Alliance for hosting us. Wishing all of you successful last few days of COP, and yeah.